and basically finish our introduction to the rebellion or the float of the Melucha. I want to apologize for my delay this morning. And now we're going to begin with the Mizmor Tehillim and then continue straight where we left off with the different sides of how the Navi presents both Rechavam and Yerabam. So we'll all say together, Perek Kuflamid, Shir HaMa'alot Mimamakim Kraticha Adonai, Adonai Shema B'Koli, Tiena Oznecha Kashuvot L'Kol Tachanunai, Im Avonot Tishmor Ya Adonai Mi Amod, Yemcha HaSlicha L'man Tivarei, Kiviti Adonai Kivta Nafshi V'Mitzvaro Hochalti, Nafshi L'Adonai Mishomim Laboker, Shomim Laboker, Yachel Yisrael El Adonai, Kim Adonai HaChesed, Barbe Yimot B'Dut, V'hu Yivzed Yisrael Mikol Avonotav. And let us hope, and not only that but may our Torot be transformed to Tfilot for Haganah, L'Chol HaChayalim, and Nechama, L'Chol Elo Shenachlu. And now when we return to see the beginnings and understand that as the Navi, it's not only going to depict the pilud, the separation of Meluchat Shlomo, but also already tell us that these are in fact the roots for the ultimate Korban, keeping in mind that albeit Achiyah Shiloni, the Navi who's living during these times contemporary to Rechavam, Yerabam, Shlomo, albeit he may be writing it, it's going to be Yirmiyahu HaNavi, living during the time of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, as Chazal teach us, who basically selects which Nivuot. He's going to be the one one can argue, to edit the Nivuot to ensure that the proper religious commentary is going to be relayed. So we're not only going to pay attention to what is being said in terms of what we generally call the historiographical Nivuot, understanding how the Navi writes history, and as much as understanding how he's writing it to teach us religious messages. So with this, we return to where we left off in Malachim Aleph Perek Yud Bet, recognizing that even though we heard in Perek Yud Aleph, we heard that there are external Satanim, there are external enemies, and what we've seen, and now we can say that we've seen it, mamash, with our own eyes, is that when you see an eruption of some type of war, you know that it's not as if it was planned just a few months earlier. Rather, these Satanim were basically latent during the entire time period of Shlomo. And when one has a strong malchut, not only politically but religiously, what happens to all those different factions? What happens to those potential enemies? HaKadosh Baruch Hu basically keeps them in tow. However, once one begins to sin, and that's why they were mentioned already in Perek Yud Aleph. So if everyone wants to quickly review, because we're going to see exactly how the Navi is going to relay the gradual breakdown of Malchut Shlomo. If you remember, the Perek began with Shlomo replacing his love of God with love of foreign wives. And then the Navi rebuked Shlomo, and immediately thereafter, Perek Yud Aleph Pasuk Yud Aleph, Vayakam Hashem Satan l'Shlomo et Hadad Ha'adomi Mizera HaMelech Hu Be'edom. He had his eastern enemy, who, if you remember, we sought refuge ultimately in the Egyptian asylum. And then, in addition to Hadad Ha'adomi, we then also found another Satan, Pasuk Chav Gimel, and they're juxtaposed by virtue of the fact that they're both external Satanim, external protagonists against Shlomo, and that was the Satan Rezin ben Eliadad, Asher Barach Me'et Hadadezer Melech Soba Adonai. We have another Satan, and he's going to go to the area of Damascus. So now we have and these two, one more eastern, one northeastern, one who's going to seek refuge in Damascus in the north, the other who's in the south. And then who basically is presented as the straw that's going to break the camel's back, that's always the internal enemy. And that's obviously the most dangerous one. Pasuk Chavav, V'yeravam ben Nevat Efratim and Hatzreda, V'shem imot Zruah, Isha Almana, Eved l'Shlomo, V'yarem Yad B'melech. Someone who had already had this instance of rebelling against the king. He didn't necessarily start a mutiny, in as much as the Navi told us, Herim Yad B'melech, He opposed the king when the king filled in the Milo. And we discussed this at length last year. The Milo being at direct access, particularly for people from Efrat, Etzion, to get to the Beit HaMikdash. He filled it in, but that meant no longer direct access. He filled it in with an Egyptian embassy, if you remember. And that meant that where did we all have to go? We had to circumvent and go all the way around. And who built this Milo? Taxpayers' money, meaning that was also Sagar et Peretz Ir David. But the primary issue was that he had denied direct access to the Beit HaMikdash. And obviously, showing us that David, the fact that Peretz Ir David intentionally left the area open, and now his son is going to close it, obviously is going to cause a significant disgruntling. But during the reign of Shlomo knew how to temper the potential rebellions, and as such, Yeravam Gibor Chayil, Bayar Shlomo Atanar Kiosem Lachahu, Be'afkedoto Lachol Sedel Beit Yosef. When you see a very strong potential leader that could really rise against you, what is the better political method to instead keep him close to you, give him a good job? But even then, Yerabam Yatzam Yerushalayim, Atiyah already told him at some point, and we discussed either the beginning or really towards the end of Shlomo, that's when he is already told that he is going to be the one who has to take. And let's just look at these psukim, because like David HaMelech, let's see if Yeravam responds in a similar fashion. He is told differently, Pasuk Lamed Aleph, Haslacha Asarach Ra'im, Ki Ko Amar Hashem Elokei Yisrael, Hineni Korea et HaMamlacha Miyad Shlomo, V'natati Lecha et Atzara HaShvatim. The Navi makes it very clear that Yeravam is going to have a more difficult job. It's not just about assuming leadership at the right time. His assuming of leadership is going to be to actually tear the leadership away from Shlomo. But the Navi does make it very clear that Hinni Korea et HaMamlacha, who is going to help him tear the Melucha away? Hashem. Hashem is going to help him. He basically says, you're going to have to do it, but don't worry, I'm going to create all the necessary factors for you to recognize exactly when the right time is, because, and he makes it very clear, this isn't the Malchut that I intended. The Malchut of Shlomo, unfortunately, has become more of an internationally idolatrous one. You have to restore it, and he makes it very clear, Pasuk Lamed Daled, V'lo akach et kol hamamlacha miyado, ki nasi ashitenu kol yemei chayav, leman David avdi, asher bacharti oto, asher shamar mitzvotai v'chukotai. I will make sure that, and you have to make sure, Yeravam, I'm not taking the entire Malchut away. David is still, or the Zera of David is still going to remain the king over Yehuda, over Yerushalayim. And one more pasuk, Pasuk Lamed Hey, V'lakachti hamlucha miyad bino, u'netatiu lecha et aseret hashvatim. Again, David has to have a near, and you'll continue to have a dynasty if you continue, Pasuk Lamed Chet, to continue Lishmor Chokotai Mitzvotai Kasher Asa David Avdi Vayiti Imach Uvaniti Lacha, the exact same terminology that we saw in Shmuel Bet Perek Zayin. If you help build my bayit in the correct manner, you build a malchut based on Torah and Mitzvot. What will I do? I will build your bayit ne'eman, the same term by David, Kasher Baniti LeDavid Benatati Lecha et Yisrael. And that's what will secure you as not only the king who will ultimately usurp the throne from Shlomo, but you're actually not usurping the throne. Shlomo's descendants are going to remain, for the sake of David, they're going to remain more or less governor kings over Yehuda. But for all intents and purposes, Yeravam, you are going to be the national king with the national dynasty pending on living up to those standards of David. So notice the potential that we have here. And therefore, from the outset, does the Navi portray Yeravam ben Nebat in a positive manner? Yes. So we can come in with our preconceived notions, knowing how this ends. So with this, we're now continuing with where we left off in Perek Yudbet. Ephraim. He's from Tzreda, which is the area of Ephraim. So Mitzuyan. And We know that he puts him as in charge of Sevel Beit Yosef. So the area of Tzreida is Ephraim, Sevel Beit Yosef. Now that is still an excellent question because it doesn't say Nachalat Yosef, it doesn't say Ephraim and Menashe. So this brings us back, if you remember, to Malachim Aleph Perek Hey, where we saw that Shlomo did something very wise, albeit it also was a certain expression of nepotism. He kept Nachalat Yehuda the way that it was, but the other 11 tribes, what did he do? He redistributed them into different provinces. Now, it's true, Sevel Beit Yosef will still be the larger one, but it wasn't exactly the original Nachalot. And we said that it was wise, and that's why it's the first part of Shlomo's life, if you remember, because that's a key factor in finally, I would say, ridding the people of tribalism. So instead, he created provinces, divided them into 12, so that they would still retain some of that original. But here we see that's why we don't have the same tribal identity that's portrayed.
Was Hashem, I mean, we can't know what Hashem intended, but was the intention that this would be a temporary thing until the Beit got its act together?
Beautiful. That's an excellent question. So here's a case where we actually do know what Hashem intended because the Navi tells us. In other words, is this ideal to have a Malchut and then Shevet Yehuda separately, Laman David? No, the ideal was what Hashem had said in Perek Zayin of Shmuel Bet, which is to have one king over a unified Israel that will retain a Malchut based on the mitzvot, chukim, u'mishpatim. Whenever that doesn't happen, then we need another leader. But because David represents think about this, from 1000 BCE till today, for 3,000 years, what does David represent? Why are the Chayalim singing David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam? He's Malchut. What do we mean by that? It's true. Again, in the Ushpizin.
It's also like the long history of Israel designating things that change the link and the change.
Excellent. We want to
just one random person with a leader, but this is part of like God's plan.
Beautiful. And so it's true. Beautiful. And because, yes, we believe, meaning the Nevi'im say Mashiach is going to come, Zera Beit David. What is it about David? What does he represent for all of us? Okay, Chesed and Achdut. Beautiful. Number one, he's the one, even though one can argue Shaul did have Yehuda under his monarchy, but why didn't he represent
because he didn't do it the right way? David HaMelech did everything the right way. So he's our example of any type of leadership.
Excellent.
In the future, as a political leader, and the Navi is a spiritual leader, and he's the Yoetz, and he's the Bet Mishpat.
Excellent.
That we'll need now. And so we have to know that Netanyahu is from David, and it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter if you're hated. David HaMelech was hated by his own family before he was
at certain times. So that's exactly as Ruth said. David becomes the standard, right? He becomes the emblem of what Malchut Yisrael represents. As a matter of fact, and it's so interesting to see just today, and when the Katzinim are going out, what are we calling our Chayalim today? It's beautiful. It's not just one Katzin and another Katzin. One saying, you are Chayalei David HaMelech, right? Have you heard this term in the news? What does it represent? It's a term of Chazal, that when David HaMelech went out to war, he took his Sefer Torah with him. Remember, a king has to have the Sefer Torah. When you hear in the news, the Haredi community talking about how they're protecting, because it's true that Torah, meaning they're right, that Torah also protects us. What is going out to war? Torah going out to war is our hishtadlut, Chayalim going out to war is our hishtadlut, to show that we believe that what is our primary strength? Actually, right, that we are Torah, Chesed, morals people.
And we remember that we have to destroy evil, even men, women, and children, because if you leave them alive in a few years, open your eyes. Those are the ones that could be holding the guns. You have to stop it now.
Yes, that's so interesting. I had Ifrit is already bringing this up. I will share with you. So our son, one of our sons is going.
Didn't we say in the last shiur I was at with Shani? I think I said it. So what about all the people who don't wear tzitzit? But we have tchelet again. We know why we always wanted tchelet. We have tchelet now. Lots of people are wearing them. They're wearing them because we're supposed to look at the blue and white contrast. What about the Degel Israel? For everybody who looks up and waves the flag, if anybody identifies with the flag of Israel, that's your tzitzit, in my eyes. So
Beautiful.
okay.
Beautiful.
I said it to soldiers I met on the base the other day. And I said, I don't know if you're dati or not dati, if you even know what tzitzit are, but if you're looking at the flag and you're here and ready to put your lives down to save Am Yisrael, to establish sovereignty in all the areas that God promised us in this land, if you're still here and willing to lay your lives down by looking at that flag, that's your tzitzit. And I think HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, yes, 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 you have a chance.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So there really is the ideological, and there's also again, the theological, to do things as God commanded. And what's interesting is that if one opens up the Gemara, what picture do you have of David HaMelech? Not as a warrior, but as a Rosh Yeshiva, meaning clearly. And what Chazal are telling you is, please, even as you're reading Nevi'im, every time you hear the Navi saying, Lishmor, Chokotay, Mitzvotai, David Abdi, you should realize that he really was that bastion of Torah scholarship and observance as well. So it's these two sides, which is the presentation of the ideal. So that's why David becomes the standard for that ideal. And Shlomo.
And he also made mistakes.
And he also made mistakes. But he knows how to do tshuva.
So our leaders can make mistakes as long as they see what they're supposed to do in their private lives and in their public lives.
Beautiful.
If they're being a good leader, they'll recognize where they're going.
Excellent, excellent. So here Shlomo also had an opportunity, and that's why we track the 3 times that he was warned, the beginning, the middle, the end, and unfortunately didn't change. So Hashem says, okay, because David, and now we understand that it's not just, okay, in the schut of David, the descendants are going to continue. It's that whenever you say, Rechava mi Beit David, what are you going to remember?
David.
You'll remember David. You'll remember that standard. You'll remember the numerous schuyot, the merits that he has because of his form of leadership that came with tshuva, that came with, again, a proper balance between, and obviously recognizing Burat Hashem. So therefore, now Hashem says to Yeravam, you know what, Yeravam, you have that potential as well. Yeravam, you can now be that pseudo David who will be the king over Yisrael. And to a certain degree, meaning that says close to the ideal that we're going to get as to now, because I still need a descendant of Beit David, but you're going to have the entire, one can say, unified Malchut Yisrael. And by the way, what proves that there's still going to be unity? 3 times a year, what will happen? All of Am Yisrael will still come to Nachalat, Yehuda, Binyamin, right over there in the middle, and they'll come and they'll recognize God, and they're not going to be at war with the people of Yehuda, just Yehuda will have its own province. And we're going to see then every step along the way, just as we began to discuss last week, how things could have been different. So now with that question, again, of what is ideal, it's clear that if David is a standard, then the Malchut Beit David is ideal, where you don't have a separate province of Yehuda, but everyone is really together. And this ideal will finally be realized, says Yecheskel Hanavi, only after Galut, when we return to Eretz Yisrael. And then the Zerah, he says, are going to be grafted together. But the king will ultimately be from whom? From Yehuda, from Azera Beit David. So we're very happy that you asked that. So that once again, we're coming into the story, recognizing that Yeravam is a very positive character. Now, until now, we saw that Rechavam is making numerous mistakes, right? So that's what we've been focused on until now. And we asked ourselves, the very end of the shiur last time, what would have happened had he not made these mistakes? For example, had he lowered the taxes, then what would have been the situation?
It wouldn't have been the time for a
That would not have been the time. Beautiful. Exactly. Meaning we could have delayed the Gzar Din that You'll see why I'm smiling in a second. The Gzardin that Hashem had already told Shlomo. He said, it's going to happen to your son. And by the way, had Rechavam, could he have delayed it even another generation? Yes, it doesn't have to be the son. It could be the grandson. And we're going to see this pattern throughout Tanakh. The reason I say this is because I really do believe, could what have happened been avoided? I don't just mean militarily. And yes, I feel like HaKadosh Baruch Hu was saying, okay, I'm giving you, you argued with one another. You had terrible Sinat Chinam for months and months. And then you had the 3 weeks between Shvat Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, which should remind you of Sinat Chinam. So you would think, I thought, and Chutzlaretz, what was going to happen, like by Tisha B'Av, we were all going to get our act together and like meet at the hotel for mincha, and big social scene anyway. And it would have been beautiful because people would have realized, oh my, we're reliving Agadot HaChorban. That didn't happen. And then Hashem said, okay, I'll give you another 3 weeks between Rosh Hashanah and Hoshana Rabbah. As a matter of fact, I'm giving you the time period of Achdut. I'm giving you Sukkot. I'm giving you Kol Ezrach B'Yisrael. I'm giving you Sukkot Shlomecha. Just get your act together. And what happens, unfortunately, right in the middle of that time? Terrible events. That's right. Yom HaKippurim. Hashem says, I'm still giving you Sukkot. I'm still giving you Sukkot. How'd that go? Not so well. I will share with you.
Along the way
Conscious of siblings. So throughout the way, right? Meaning we all notice this. Remember siblings, sisters, brothers, 4 times over. B'diuk, achim, achayot, over and over and over again. B'diuk. And then the Rambam says something so fascinating. He says when it comes to Shmini Atzeret, he says Shmini Atzeret is the day after Sukkot, the 8th day. He says, and what's the whole point of the Chag? So Rashi says, Kasha Lai Pri Datchem, and Hasidim understands it as it's so hard for me to see you separate.
It's also separate.
Exactly, separate between yourselves. So we know we put everything down. We put the lulav down, the estrog down, hadas and maravot. We don't have the sukkah anymore. The Rambam says it's a different type of simcha. And then he says, the point of Shmini Atzeret, he says, is loho'il masha lo yacholnu leho'il, what we couldn't get to, basukot, no'il will be able to accomplish babatim ubabinyanim. What we couldn't do outside, we're going to then do in our houses and in our buildings. And it hit me on Shmini Atzeret when we were all in the same miklat together, all different people from all walks of life. Hashem was saying, if you can't do this in your sukkah, you can't do this on the streets, you can't get together for Tefillot Yom HaKippurim, then what am I going to do? I'm going to force you to miklatim, wherever you happen to be on, when was it? Monday. Wherever you happen to be on Monday. And someone told me she was in Cafe Rimon in Yerushalayim and with her parents from America. And there was such mayhem because they didn't know where to go. And they ended up, we were all squished together in a small miklat near the restaurant. And they were all there and they started singing Ani Mamin together in the miklat. I said, that's exactly it. So we couldn't do in our sukkot and on the streets. Hashem said he'll do in your buildings. Yes, and then we're going to go on.
Yes, I just want to pull your picture back even further from the last year. If you think about it, I've had experiences in the last week. My teenage relatives are now back on Zoom. I'm supposed to be going to a wedding that I can see on Zoom. If I can, I would love to be there, but it's going to be a very small wedding. Weddings are going ahead. How do we know how to do this now so smoothly? Corona came.
Yes, 100%.
Corona has given us our eyes to so many different things. We know what to do today, and we're not like stunned and like, what are we going? We're not scrambling. HaKadosh Baruch Hu started this a long time ago. We started it a long time ago. Then when we say we don't see HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hand, well, if we're seeing it now, you can all calm down because he's giving us a big V. Yes. And even for collateral, that's another discussion, but I just stop there.
Beautiful, beautiful.
That's what I feel.
Yafe, yafe ma'oda. So now let's take a look at where we left off last week. Perek Yud Bet, Pasuk Tedvav. V'lo shama hamelach el ha'am. So we discussed that had he listened, he could have delayed this. Okay, he didn't, just as we didn't. Hashem said, okay, here's now going to be the time. And that's why, take a look at the continuation of the Pasuk with which we ended. Ki hayta siba me'im Hashem. There was a siba. Now, just because there is a siba, does that mean that we have to be the ones to realize it? Meaning that we have to be the ones to actualize the siba? No. So that's why the Nabi says, you already know. I already told you that God, as a punishment, really was going to bring this about. Did it have to be now? Did it have to be Tashin Pei Dalet? Did it have to be at this particular moment? No. Hayta siba me'im Hashem leman hakim et varo. So just like Ruth just said, and when you look post facto, can you see a lot of the hands of Hashem? Yes. And therefore, the Nabi writing this post facto says, this makes sense that Rechavam wouldn't listen, even though it should have been obvious that he should have listened to the lowering of the taxes to the sages of Shlomo. But this is going to be the perfect pretense for Hashem's plan to unfold. I just want to pause for a minute because this sounds very tragic and morbid, right? That Hashem gave a nibuah and he'll allow for circumstances to happen so that they will unfold. I do want to encourage you by saying that the same thing happens with regard to the nivuot of what we call acharit hayamim, that Hashem wants to make sure that it's the right opportune time for good things to happen. Meaning, why was it Koresh who allowed us to return and not Belshazzar? Because Koresh was basically, he conquered Babylonia anyway. So what a great opportunity to have someone literally not only give a divine message, but he's making a political statement, which is, I am now undermining all the Babylonian policies, right? Everyone see this? So we're not going to get into that now, but this would be a great time for good things to happen also. So Pasuk Tetzayin, Vayar Kol Yisrael, Hilo Shama HaMelech Aleihim. So as we said, wherein he could have tempered them, he could have kept some of their frustrations at bay, but now that they saw he didn't, V'yashvu ha'am et HaMelech Davar Lemor, Ma lanu chelek b'David. They use this as a pretense for separation, knowing already that, again, as we saw, that Yerubam, right, is waiting for the right moment in Mitzrayim. So now they say, you know what? I don't think we should really be part of this malchut. What does it mean in terms of practical expression? So that's very nice that they say, okay, what are they basically saying? We're not paying taxes, right? Meaning this is an act of rebellion. Okay, we see you. We recognize that you are Beit David. And this is what we said from the very beginnings of Shlomo. And to a certain degree, we already saw it by David more coming from Yoav. What do I mean by this? A little bit of nepotism towards Yehudah. And why was there some favoritism towards Yehudah? Well, it made sense, right? Yehudah is Malchut. Yehudah knows that right now, especially through David, there's the promise not only of Yaakov Avinu, but of the Navi to David himself. And Yehudah was the strongest of the tribes, and Yehudah is the most protected. And Yehudah owns Hebron, right? We rule over Hebron, which is the entrance from the south, for all intents and purposes, the mountain range. And Yehudah is basically one of the wealthiest of the tribes. And Yehudah, really, for those reasons, would primarily be the ones to go out in the military. They were the Sayeret Makals. They were all the elite units from Yehudah. And they were the ones protecting David, which is why, if you remember, after Mered Avshalom, Yoav says, can you not forget about, like, Shevet Yehudah? I know you're trying to appease everyone else, and you're still looking for Achdut, and that's really wonderful, but don't turn away those that are closest to you. So there definitely is a sense of you want to bring those farther from you, closer to you, but don't forget about those that are closer to you as well. And obviously this has ramifications for today too. And therefore, Yeah, I know what we see in terms of the people recognizing, they themselves say, you know what, Bachavan? Okay, you're Beit David. We respect you for being Beit David, but we're not going to pay your taxes. Meaning you and Yehuda, you'll get along just fine. Vayelach Yisrael Ye'ohalav, which if you remember, also from Sefer Shoftim. This is not the ideal analogy of everyone going home to their tent. The ideal would be everyone going to their nachala, to their bayit even, but an OL is a temporary structure. So the Nabi is already telling us that the nation is not as strong, that they're each one to their own OL. Ubnei Yisrael hayoshvim ba'arei Yehuda, and this is a very interesting terminology. We haven't heard this term, Bnei Yisrael. If anything, who's going to Yehuda? Not Bnei Yisrael, but Bnei Yehuda. What is the Nabi trying to tell you? Please, even though you see that obviously the majority of Bnei Yisrael are now seceding from the union, in your minds, he's telling us, the readers, who are still Bnei Yisrael, Yehuda, meaning they're not separated at this point. Hayoshvim ba'arei Yehuda. And what he's also telling us is, can you realize that there was a tremendous amount of unity? There really were people from all of Yisrael. Which tribes included?
The northern one.
The northern tribes that were in Arei Yehuda, right? Which makes sense. Why would there be different people from different tribes living in the cities of Yehuda, even if they weren't their nachalot? Mishmarot of Yafeh, meaning of Kuhuna, beautiful, excellent, right? So Sarah's mentioning the Kohanim definitely lived around the Beit HaMikdash, excellent, even though there were also pockets of Levium throughout the country, Mitzuya and more Levium living. Which other tribes though? Why would you have other Bnei Israel? Excellent, meaning if the taxes were all collected in Yerushalayim, I imagine that it made sense for many officials, for tax officials, from other tribes to live in Yerushalayim as well. How about businesses? Meaning, even if my nachala, if I have, it's true, my real estate is in Yisachar, but I'm doing business, or, I'm doing construction. I can imagine all the construction contractors probably, they left their nachalot to their brothers-in-law or their brothers, and they came to Yerushalayim. In other words, what the Nabi is also telling us is not only is this term of Bnei Yisrael associated also with the area of Yehuda, but there really are Bnei Yisrael and Yehuda. Why is this extremely significant? This is a pasuk that we just read and almost just gloss over, but this is going to be the basis for the beginnings of Shabbat Zion and how Ezra HaSofer, in the first, as we know, 9 chapters of Sefer Ezra, he basically tells us, or I would say the focus is on the first 4 chapters, where he focuses on all those who came from Babylonia and came back to live in Eretz Yisrael. And he's very particular about teaching us that they're from different tribes, right? And the point is to show that we have a claim, right? Because there are different people coming from different tribes, we don't just have a claim to Yehuda. Where else do we have a claim to? Everywhere, right? Basically, you have a claim to Naphtali, you have a claim to the areas of Asher. And he says, so-and-so was from Asher. And you're supposed to say, wait, I thought that they were exiled by the Assyrians. And now we understand. Were there representatives of all the other tribes? Yes, and which means that they continue through the generations. Are they still going to be the minority? Yeah. And over the course of the next 400 years? Definitely. Nonetheless, this already tells us they become absorbed by Rechavam. Right, so just by show of hands, how many of you are descendants of Yehuda? How many of us are from Yehuda? Again, 99% of you should raise your hands. You don't tell us if you want. Unless, are you a Levi? Any Benot Levian? We have a few. Even a Bat Cohen. We only have one Bat Cohen.
I'm a Bat Cohen.
Okay, sorry. Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. Wow. Okay. I'm going to borrow your white clothing. I'm
Nachshon.
You really are a Nachshon. That's her last name. Wow.
No, and the name has been like that, and we don't know where it came from. In the 1800s, we can't follow it back anymore. But we are sure understanding that now is not the time to daven for me. I have to get active and jump in.
Yeah, fair.
So you daven, I'm going in the water.
You go in the water.
Actually, I need to be Nakshan right now. Jump in.
That sound very, very true. Yeah,
And that's the reason that I came here to Efrat. I didn't know whether to come to Gush Etzion or not. I looked in the Tanakh. I argued with my husband. He wanted to live somewhere else in the country because it would be easy for him to get to work. It's not true. They also have the same traffic problems. And he has never regretted it since, and I certainly haven't.
That is beautiful.
And I looked, I never left it.
That's right.
Okay, I looked into that and I knew this was the right place. So yeah, you're all here. You're all in the right place. Don't even think about going to Chutz La'aretz.
It's so yeah. It's anyone from Binyamin by any chance? If you were, you would probably know as well a lot of some Teitelbaums, Teichmans. Some of them know they're from Binyamin. There's a shul in Sfat for B'nai Binyamin, right? People who know it, they have a hard time getting a minyan, but basically they all know that they're descendants of Binyamin. So same way as Nachshon passed down generation to generation, that they were from Binyamin exiled with the people of Yehuda.
I was thinking that the fact that they were already mixed up, so to speak, was, and again, remember you said in Taragin, the thing that Shlomo had not stuck to the specific orders and did some gerrymandering and like mixed things up, but it could have been that this was like already the end of tribal society. Instead, it turned into more tribalism.
Correct.
It could have gone the other way. I think that maybe that's what I was trying to say.
100%. And it seems as if one day it will, right? That's how Yecheskel describes it. Be'ezrat Hashem. So sure enough, so Rechavam, now one can argue that they seceded from the union, right? And the union is still Yehuda with people from some of the other tribes as well. And they have a melech, which means that, okay, those that are going to be willing to be taxed, those that still have, now, by the way, I'm from Yehuda. Why would I stay? Why am I also not rebelling? Right. So you should say
taxes.
Beautiful, meaning it's not that, okay, I know that there's a promise to Malchut Beit David and I'm not allowed to leave Yehuda. No. They don't have the same taxes. So now the question is, just from a political economic perspective, I'd like you all to anticipate, what do you think is going to happen to Yehuda over the next few years? So the people of Yehuda, he's going to have to raise the taxes for the people of Yehuda, but still, can you maintain the same type of expansion and government maintenance with one tribe as you did? You had to just think of the taxes. It was every tribe was giving you 3 months basically of their economy. That's right, of their both a labor tax, a fiscal tax. And now you don't have that. They're rebelling. Yehuda never paid the same amount because they're from Yehuda. They're from Malchut Beit David. So they did have to. They had to still donate their money, but not necessarily the labor tax. Because one could argue, and I understand Shlomo, I could argue that whatever you're doing in, for example, building this would be interesting, right? And these are machlokot today, right? Where does the Matnas Efrat get money to run Matnas events and to build? They have their own municipality, right? There are certain places around Yerushalayim that still receive funding from Yerushalayim, right? Until recently, Tzor Hadassah, right? Till recently, Ma'ale Adumim, still remote, which isn't that much farther from Yerushalayim than Tzor Hadassah. Sorry, but it is, even though it's like its own area.
But it's a school now.
Yeah, until recently, Mebaseret Zion had to get Ishurim from Yerushalayim. Now there are also advantages, right? Why would I want to pay Yerushalayim taxes and not Gush Etzion taxes? Right, I get more services. Right? You see that? So the people of Yehuda, again, that was part of it. That on one hand, they had less taxes, but whatever they were doing benefited Yerushalayim as well. So there was this symbiotic relationship. So if I'm from Ephraim, I understand it, even though Does it bother me a little?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So now let's take a look and see. So there isn't hatred between the tribes themselves. There's frustration with the king, right? The political leader, the prime minister, if you want to say it, there's tremendous frustration. And now they feel, okay, we just have to for our own survival, which means that naturally Yehuda is going to suffer economically, which will naturally weaken its entire infrastructure, right? So that's important to keep in mind. Pasuk Yudchet. Vayishlach hamelech Rechavam et Adoram asher al Hamas. And therefore his first act, right? Meaning right now they're rebelling and saying we're not going to pay taxes. So think of the British, and I'm sorry for all the North American here for a moment. Think of the British and the Boston Tea Party. Thank you. I know, I'm sorry. The British and the Boston Tea Party, and then, right, no taxation without representation, right? What happens? The colonies basically said, we're not paying taxes. That's right. And then what happened? Then a port at the Boston port, right? The tea came in and filled with tea. And they started unloading, and the British said, no, what do you have to do? Pay your taxes. And what did the colonists say? We're not. And what are we going to do instead? Throw the tea overboard. Now, did that start the American Revolution? Not yet. Not yet. What was that? Okay, that was an isolated incident in Boston, right? Everyone see that? So then what did the British do? Then they came in with, they raised taxes, exactly. Then they came in with their forces to collect the taxes. And at that point, we're now in Lexington and Concord. What happened? Then the colonists came out and fought. So get ready. Even though Rechavam knows, did they tell him we're not paying taxes? Yes. Boston Tea Party. Yes. Okay, fine. I get it. What is he going to do then? I will send you my forces, Adoram Asher al Hamas. I'm going to send you my chief tax collector, who, by the way, was a tax collector appointed by Shlomo, Adoram, who I can imagine sat in his nice office most of the time. And now he's going to go out to the north to collect the taxes and basically say, come on, guys, really? Right? Meaning, this is what you're supposed to do. You're getting services from the king. You're still coming to the Beit HaMikdash. Come pay your taxes. And now comes Lexington and Concord. By Gemut Kol Yisrael Bo Even, they stone him by Yamot. And he dies. So now what does the king realize? Oh my, this is war. We're going to pause just for a moment, because at every stage we said we're going to discuss what could have been and what was. What could have been at this very moment? What could have been? Pretend you don't know the story. What could have been? He gets up in a Merkava. Merkava is not just a chariot, but a chariot of war, right? Meaning with his riders. He's coming today. It really is a type of tank. Again, going in a Merkava. I can imagine. Is he going alone? Exactly. The tank is called Merkava.
Not by chance.
Nachon. So while he's going out with, do you think he's going alone in his own private chariot? No, he's with an army. He's going with an army. What could have happened at this very moment?
A summit, a meeting.
Oh, that's the positive. Okay, let's take it to the negative. So Chad is saying he could have made peace at that time. What could he have done? He could have said, okay, let's reach a Hescape. Mitsuya, that's the most positive. What else could have happened? He could have gone to war with him, right? Everyone see that? This could have turned into a major civil war right now. And yet, and we're going to see now with the pages that you have in front of you, Chazal say this is really to Rechavan's credit. And now that Rechavan, the positive perspective, we're going to see in these psukim, he comes to his Merkava, Lanus Yerushalayim, Yisrael. Sorry?
What page?
Oh, sorry, the second page where it says Rechavan, the positive perspective. And this is really remarkable. Instead, Zamit Zalot Merkava, he knew this, meaning when he sent Adoram, which means that when he sent the tax collector, that's what I meant by the British soldiers, he sent him with soldiers. And he was there in his Merkava, And he could have started, really, he could have gone out to war. Instead, he turns around and goes to Yerushalayim. Yisrael b'Beit David at Hayom Hazeh. So who, in the end, is the one that the Navi criticizes? Yisrael. Vayivshu Yisrael. In the end, he says, the straw that really broke the camel's back was what Yisrael did, meaning here's our Lexington and Concord. And you're going to say they came out ahead. But actually, from the Navi's perspective, Rechavam came out ahead. So that it's true, they're not going to pay taxes, but what didn't happen as a result? There wasn't a civil war and you can call it a Yisrael Yehuda revolution, right? A revolutionary war. At that moment, Vayhi Kishmal Kol Yisrael Kishav Yeravam has been reading the Shechem Times, and he knows what's been going on because, like David before him, he's waiting for that moment that Achia is alluding to, where he can provide for them an alternate malchut. Vayishlechu vayikru oto el ha'ida vayamlichu oto al kol Yisrael. That was a pretty smooth transition. Lo haya charei Beit David zulati shevet Yehuda levado. And the only ones who stayed faithful to Malchut Beit David at this point were shevet Yehuda. So if we take a look, Chazal in fact tell us that Rechavam acted with tremendous restraint. Rechavam acted also with a sense of clearly knowing this prophecy. Meaning, why would he not go out to fight the civil war? So we're going to see that Shmaya, we're going to learn now the next Nebuah, which we're not exactly sure if chronologically the next Nebuah really was given at that moment, or if Rechavam knew that. So I forgot who asked, whether it was last week or the week before, why didn't Shlomo provide a tzaba'ah for Rechavam in a similar manner that David did for Shlomo? I said, of course, did he?
Yes.
Yes, but it wasn't necessary for the Navi to tell us because he basically tells us more or less what the tzaba'ah is. As opposed to by Shlomo, you need a tzaba'ah because there really was, and you need to hear that clear statement in last will and testament to show the transition. It's the first time there's a transition of the succession of Malchut, the natural succession. Here, there doesn't really need to be a tzaba'ah because Rechavam doesn't need to be appointed because he's the heir to the Solomonic throne. So Darabah, thank you. To the throne, and therefore, instead, what we find is that now we're going to hear what the Navi tells Rechavam. Do you think Shlomo told Rechavam, oh, by the way, I made mistakes, and you should just know that the Malchut will probably be torn away sometime in your lifetime?
No.
Probably yes. Why? As a warning. In other words, for him to know that, do everything you can to prevent it, which he thought meant, okay, so I'll raise the taxes, that's right. But at this moment, why doesn't he start a civil war? Chazal say because he knew that Nebuah. And out of respect to the Nebuah, he knew that prophecy. He knew that at some point, the Malchut of Shlomo really was going to be taken away. And we're going to see this corroborated in the ensuing psukim right now. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'achol v'yevitzvaro.
But whether he actually told him, which I don't think so, because maybe he says, I got the Nebuah, and even if he does, like, I do believe that Hashem will do it, you sort of don't believe until it happens. I mean, I can give, when there are plenty of things I've worked in, whatever it is, I try and tell my boss, even a safety measure when I was working with people in wheelchairs, and nothing is happening, until it happens. So I don't think that he really, even if you said be prepared.
Yes. I think it's so interesting and almost ironic today, meaning now there are all these officers coming out and saying, I told them that the security fence wasn't strong enough. I told them that Hezbollah and Hamas were going to ally. I told them that with all the cameras, we need a much different system. I told them that we need human forces. And I understand that's exactly it. Meaning on one hand, those dangers really are there and everyone chooses whether or not to believe in those threats or not, and to decide when is the time. It could have been 5 years
Which
ago, it could have been 5 years from now,
You know,
right? That all-
so wasn't the same in 73? Didn't Golden Era get some warnings?
Yes, yes. So that's exactly it, meaning, I'd say we're so much smarter in hindsight. But really, meaning, let's say that on, I think about this really all the time, let's say on Shmini Atzeret, that the Gaza border would have been lined with military forces. Then would this not have happened?
Probably.
It wouldn't have happened then, but then when would it have happened?
They would have another shot.
Exactly, meaning they would have waited for a different opportune moment, meaning they would have created a distraction in Yehuda and Shomron. And maybe, there would have been many terrible things going on here. And then what would Tzahal have done? Because there are only 100,000 standing soldiers, what would they have done? So in 5 years from now, they would have sent them to Yehuda and Shomron. And then what would it, meaning at some point, Hamas was going to do this, right? The question is how, what, when, where. What's also remarkable, some people are saying today that it really is remarkable that mamash, their plan was to come when everything was open, when exactly it was a setup, and they really thought there was a whole plan how they were going to take over every yishuv. And you have to wonder what they weren't thinking, that Tzahal was going to group and come and attack, and now they're coming out with, yes, they thought that. How were people going to come? They thought that Tzahal was going to come in tremendous numbers, and that then they were set up for many more. They weren't set up for the guerrilla warfare that ended
Let me
up,
go now.
which is so remarkable.
We're
Meaning,
taking our time and doing Hashem's work the way He wants it. So it's going to be a win for us.
Bezrat Hashem, Bezrat Hashem. Okay, so back to this. So Rechavam, I have to be careful myself as well. Pasuk Yechad, Pasuk Vayi Kishma Kol Yisrael, Kishab Yerabam. So now they amlichu oto Kol Yisrael lo haya acharei Beit David zulati shebet Yehuda levado. Vayavo Rechavam Yerushalayim. And now we're going to hear the next stage. Now keep in mind that this is a tactic of a literary device. There are many events that are going on simultaneously, but because the text is not a two-sided television, right? We can see simultaneous events. So right now, the Navi is focusing clearly on whom? Rechavam. He's going to tell us everything about Rechavam. And then he's going to start shifting the spotlight to Yerabam. But as very cautious readers, we have to remember, is this really going on simultaneously? Yes. So we're basically going to finish up with Rechavam, almost bid farewell to Rechavam, and then we'll get to Yerabam, but realize that he's obviously here at the same time. So now, back to Rechavam. Rechavam is now in Yerushalayim. Vayakel et kol Beit Yehuda ve'et shevet Binyamin 180,000 bachur osem milchama lilachem in Beit Yisrael. So we saw that he could have had a civil war, Lexington and Concord, again during the tax. But then he says, okay, now I'll just regroup. I have a stronger army. I'm going to now fight against them. He realizes, does this have to happen during my time? No, I have a strong army. Let me go out and form this army. This is where we hear, and that's why I meant that it's not clear exactly when this nevuah was told by Pasuk Bet, by Hidvar Elokim El Shmaya, Ish Elokim. Wait a second, Shmaya, I haven't heard of Shmaya, which is ironic because his name is Shmaya. And we haven't heard of Shmaya before. The Navi that was speaking both to Yeravam and Shlomo was Achia Hashiloni. Where is he from? Shiloh, which is why now that, Shiloh is part of whose territory? It's beautiful, but she just has a tremendous amount of Nivuah, about Nivuah, that we said that there are hundreds of Nevi'im living in every generation. Do you remember this from our introduction of Nivuah? But there's always going to be, the Nivuot that we have are those that were preserved and canonized because they were given on a national level. What does that mean to have a Nivuah on a national level? It means that you have a Navi HaMelech. Basically, on your cabinet sits a court prophet. That court prophet is not just a parochial prophet. It's not just a personal prophet. He's your national, political, religious prophet. He's the one to tell you again what the will of God is right now. And it's up to you to make your decisions, your political decisions, based on the will of God. And therefore, the writings of the national prophets were preserved because they have national import. Right, everyone see that? So until now, we heard about Achiyah Shiloni. Sorry.
Can you just tell me right now who has Netanyahu's ear in that
Who's the
capacity?
prophet at
Who
the
does he
time?
really listen to?
And now who does Netanyahu religiously listen to?
He's got Smotrich. He's got Smotrich. He's got Ben-Gvir.
Maybe he gets a lot of brachot from Rabbanim, but I don't know. I don't know. Sorry.
He's got Smotrich and Ben-Gvir.
But no one,
You're the crazy.
but no one's a Navi today, which is.
That's not true.
Okay, so we'll talk about this after. We'll talk, okay.
What do you think you're doing?
Where? Beautiful, beautiful. So Marcel is asking a great question. I know that Achiyah is from Shiloh, in which case he can't be the Navi Hamelech for Rechavam anymore. Why not? Geographically, right? Everyone sees. So that's already going to tell us something about every Navi that we're going to see from now. Generally, please remember this. Nevi'im are, I'd like to use this term, indigenous to the geographic area that they're meant to address, right? So for example, and beautiful, there are, again, generally we find if you're going to be a Navi for from now on the north, then it makes sense that you'll be from the north and from the centers of the north so that you understand the people, you know their background, you know where they're coming from, right? This is essential for a Navi. There are going to be a few exceptions which are supposed to, again, make us realize, wait a second, something is awry if Hashem has to tell Amos from Tekoa in Yehuda to go all the way to Ephraim in Beitel, right? Something is wrong. So some Nevi'im say, no, he's not from Tekoa here. He's from Tekoa in Shomron. And yet most of the Parshanim say, no, don't worry. He's from Tekoa here, right? He is. So why would Hashem send a Navi from Yehuda to give you rebuke to the people of Yisrael, which, by the way, what happens when he gives them Nevuah? They say, Brach Lacha, Amos, go back to Eretz Yehuda. Like, thank you very much, but you're not one of us. Yeah, no, go. We're not gonna, support you over here. And therefore you have to ask them, why did Hashem do this? Right? And the answer is that sometimes you need, Hashem is basically saying a wake-up call, right? You can't even see yourselves, your own Nevi'im, right? Can't really see from within. Let me tell you, right? Let me send someone from an extreme, a different voice, right? A very aristocratic, sophisticated, wealthy voice, but nonetheless, again, a voice that hopefully is going to alarm you in a different way. So to answer Marcel's question, Achiyah is from Shiloh, so clearly where's Shmaya from? Yehuda. So it doesn't even have to tell you that. So Shmaya is from Yehuda, and he's going to address, so from now on, we have different Nevi'im for the different kings, which is very sad, because having the same court prophet is also a way of unifying the people. So now each one is going to have a particular prophet.
Is it also a good demotion?
Thank you. So we're going to speak about this as well. Beautiful. It's going to come up in next chapter, which is going to be one of the most, I'm going to say, fascinating chapters of Nevuah, where we're going to bring in many of these different, I'm going to say, calibrations really of Nevuah. Says Isha Lukim is not the same level of Nevuah. And we brought this up, if you remember, in Sefer Shoftim. Anyone remember Sefer Shoftim? Please just nod your head so that I feel better. Thank you. And in Sefer Shoftim, we said, wait, where are Nevi'im? So he said that there are different forms of Nevuah. And Navi is actually someone who, so we'll discuss it right now. There are three different manners in which the words of God, in which the religious messages are delivered to Am Yisrael, right? So they're delivered through people, but three different types, or exactly, sometimes they're called Malachim, sometimes they're called Ish Elokim, and sometimes they're called beautiful. What's the difference between them? So a Navi, beautiful, a Navi comes from the etymology of Nib, right? He's someone who verbalizes, he's someone who engages. He uses his literally his speech talents, right? His articulations in order to engage with the people. The job of a Navi, the purpose of a Navi, the function of a Navi is to engage with the people in speech, right? So if Ruth was bringing up, again, Netanyahu and all of his, again, all different people that you're asking who's his Navi, basically I can say today, again, the people that he advises with, the people that engage with him, right? That would be the Navi, and the Navi is really the, going to say the most effective by virtue of the fact that There's a constant engagement of speech with the people, as opposed to an Isha Elokim. All you know about him is that he's a man of God. How do you know he's a man of God who's coming to deliver a message? Generally, that's all he does. Either he delivers a message, or, but how do I know that he's a man of God? So generally, an Isha Elokim is also coming to depict that you see something miraculous about him. He comes to perform. Usually, it's not necessarily his power of speech in as much as an action that he does, right? That you can say, first they recognize that Eliyahu is an Isha Elokim, and only later, right? So you could also be a Nabi, right? Says the Isha Tzarfatit. And that's when she has, see, and revive my child. How does she know? You're an Isha Elokim. You're an Isha Elokim. You live, in a different sphere. Moshe Rabbeinu is first recognized as an Isha Elokim, and only then do they start listening to him as a Nabi. So please remember this. I'm so happy that Shira asked this, because Chazal are going to conserve his personality with Isha Elokim coming up in next week's class, i.e. next chapter. Beautiful. And then you have a Malach. What's a Malach? A messenger. That's right. Who could be a Malach? Anyone here can be a Malach. It doesn't have to be a celestial angel. A Malach is literally a messenger. Someone that you happen to bump into on the street today. That could be a Malach. There's someone that I call there's someone I call a Malach every time, like something, something happens in a particular regard. I just happen to see her, and I call her. It's so clear that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is sending you at this particular time. Even sometimes, like I'll see her just on the street, and I say, yes, I needed to see you today. You'd like to give me chizuk in this area. So I'm sure, think about all the malachim that you have in your lives, because you have many malachim in your lives. So with this in mind, now does a malach engage?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, meaning the point of a malach is to do what? Is to deliver a message from God. That's exactly it. So in Sefer Shoftim, we had many malachim. Why were they? No, exactly. They were, some of them were angels, exactly, and some were people. How also every malach, meaning a shaliach, Vayishlach Yaakov malachim, right after he saw celestial angels, he then sent again real people. And now, why is this significant? Because can a malach also be a nabi? Yes. If they, again, a nabi is someone who more consciously is delivering these messages of God. Definitely in Sefer Shoftim, the malachim were quoting Hashem again clearly, and yet why are they called a malach?
They have that one tafkid.
Exactly, because they had one tafkid. They don't stay to engage with the people. This is a message, meaning sometimes if we're deserving then, or if we listen to a malach, what would have been the next step? Then the malach either becomes a nabi, or that Hashem would send a nabi. Everyone see this? So the ideal is really a nabi, a constant, right? We call a constant pipeline with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Isha Elokim, the focus is going to be more on the actions, divine actions, and a malach is going to be more a one-time shlichut.
An actual angel is a malach Elokim?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah. Or a malach Hashem.
Malach, then it could just be anybody.
It could be anybody, right? That's why I said I'm sure you have many malachim in your lives that can think about them. Again, what makes him an Isha Elokim? Either he did have an action, or post facto, keep that in mind. We're going to say, okay, you'll see he's an Isha Elokim. And more El Rechavam ben Shlomo Melech Yehuda Bel Kol Beit Yehuda U Binyamin V'Yetar Ha'am Leimor, which now tells us, back to Shira's question, it could very well be people recognize him as an Isha Elokim. They just knew him as a godly man. Now Hashem says, Mr. Godly Man, Shmaya, what do I want you to do? Because Rechavam will respect you, because everyone knows you to be a godly man. I don't know, maybe he lives, maybe people come to him for brachot to have children, whatever the case may be. He's a recognized Isha Elokim. He's not yet a Navi. Hashem now says Shmaya, right? Hashem just listens to him. So it could very well be. We don't know what the source of his Isha Elokim is yet, and we're going to see that bothers Chazal. But Yafeh, he also listens to Hashem, Mitsuyan. So Hashem now tells the Isha Elokim, go and deliver a message to Rechavam. The message is as follows. And I tell him, they'll call me to Yehuda, Binyamin, V'Yeter Ha'am. Once again, corroborating, is it really just Yehuda? No, there are some extras there as well. Kol Hashem, Lo Ta'alu, V'Lo Talachamun, Im Asechem B'nei Yisrael, Shuvu ish lebeito ki mi'iti niyeh hadavar hazeh. What does it mean? Ki mi'iti niyeh hadavar hazeh. Meaning, is the rebellion from me? No, it's the people rebelling. But what is Hashem saying? This has to happen. And this, by the way, is one of the corroborations for both the Ramban and the Ramban to say that how does God act in this world? Through nature. And what is the challenge of the Nabi or a Malach or Nisha Lukim to point out? I just want you all to know that this is from God, right? What's amazing is that, as we were saying, if there was a Nabi today, everyone would say, like, we know this is from God, right? What's happening today, and there are different signs. And the remarkable feature of Rechavam is that he listens. They all listen. Now, if I was a political analyst, how would I write the story? I would say Rechavam had an opportunity to go. He was very angry. They just rebelled against him. The act of a rebellion now leads to obviously attrition. Of course, he should go and punish them with some type of civil war, with some type of massacre. Everyone see this? And it could be that why did he back down?
He was afraid.
He was afraid. He realized he's going to be outnumbered. They're really not going to pay taxes. Then, this is going to cost him millions and, in warfare. So that could be.
This is 12. Channel 12 saying this.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure what you were saying. Yes, I'm over to say there. Everyone see that? The Navi's channel says, why did he back down? As he was listening to Hashem. He was listening to the Navi. And once again, this is going to be extremely positive. They're going to say goodbye to Rechavam. We're basically not going to hear from Rechavam again. So can we just in our minds imagine what's going on in Malchut Yehuda right now?
They're waiting.
They're waiting, meaning they're still going on. That's right. Meaning, is it same old, same old?
No, just a smaller government.
A smaller government. The people in any case were more, one can argue, more provincial, a priori. Again, their lives are more or less the same. Are they going to the Beit HaMikdash?
Yes.
And do they still get to meet their cousins
Yes.
in the Beit HaMikdash? Again, for now, exactly, in the north, 100%. They probably didn't see their cousins from the north that often anyway, and they're going to visit them for Yom Ha'atzmaut barbecues, and meaning not much has changed other than the fact that they don't have as much money coming in, so the effects are going to be longer term, but okay, everything seems to be okay. In the meantime, that's why I said it's important that we realize in the meantime, Yerevam is going to be establishing his own great, right? They'll pay lower taxes. He's going to be dealing with their infrastructure. Let's read one pasuk in anticipation of next week.
Do you think the beginning of the period of the Sarah and now to when Rabbi Ishmael goes up and he's told he's come from me, going to have you. Do you think that?
So she was asking the famous midrash. It's actually a late midrash, and of Ela Eskara, of the 10 martyrs, that begins with. It was actually added on later. That begins with this idea of Rabbi Yishmael the Kohen Gadol being sent to communicate with the angels above, and one of the angels tells him that yes, this is a gzar din mishamayim. That these 10 martyrs are going to have to be killed. And really, it's for Mechirat Yosef, meaning it's a key word for Sinat Achim, for Sinat Chinam, 100%, right? And even that story, meaning the fact that it was added later from the Paitan, because what do we say? Post facto, we say anything that happened was really a gzar din from Hashem, right? Clearly, meaning when we write this from a religious perspective, so don't worry, Ruth. Again, if it's not you or me, someone's going to write like the Nevuah of Melchemet Mashiach HaRuach. Remember this? They'll write it. And how are they going to write it? So I'm sure there are going to be certain military analysts who will write about it from a military perspective. Exactly. Meaning, how will the Nabi write it? The Nabi will write all about Sinat Chinam, and it was a gzar din mishamayim. Right? Everyone see that? The thing is, we can write it today already. Yeah, but definitely in a few years from now. And yes, gzar din mishamayim. So here, in a similar vein, meaning, how do they know that? How do we know that, yes, there are certain things that God really wanted? Generally, Hashem says it. Here, the Navi says, Hashem had said it, both to Shlomo and to Yerevam, and now also to Rechavam. So yes, Gzar Din. Now he said there are certain Gizrei Din that could be changed. We're going to see this as we continue in Sefer Melachim. The most notorious king of Yehuda is going to be Menashe. He's told, that's it. God has to destroy Yehuda. So we're waiting for the Churban Beit HaMikdash already at the turn of the 6th century BCE. Why did it wait till 586, till 120 years after Menashe? And what's the answer? Because Yoshiyahu is able to delay it. You can delay a Gzar Din, right? So that's why I said maybe this whole Hamas, this terrible thing, maybe it could have happened 10 years ago, but we were okay 10 years ago, right? Or meaning a lot of all the midrashot, all the yeshivot, all the learning in the women's Beit Midrash. So Hashem said, not yet. You really, okay, came this terrible Sanat Chinan, the Seder, right? So this is really part of the trajectory of Nevuah, right? To understand now, does every king listen to his Navi? No, which is an act against Hashem. That's exactly it. And things are always terrible when they don't listen to their Navi, except for one. We'll get to Achav when we get to him, which is an anomaly in and of itself. But back to this, again, Vayishmu Dvar Hashem. So now the Navi says, this is what I want. Will Yehuda still be successful? Yes, that's exactly what's going on. Vayiven Yerabam et Shechem Bahar Ephraim, Vayesheba, Vayetze Misham, Vayiven et Pnuel. The reason why I wanted to continue one more pasuk is because keep in mind, while one thing is going on, what else is going on? Why? One can argue also, why else would Rechavam realize that the people aren't going to come back to him? What's the first thing Yerevam does, which is brilliant? He builds up where? Shechem and Pnuel. Where are Shechem and Pnuel? Shechem, okay, the capital Shechem, and the place of the Brit, meaning, what does he want to say? I'm not just a good political king. I'm a religious. You have to love your Rabbam. I'm giving you one puzzle. And Pnuel, what happened in Pnuel? That's where Yaakov Avinu, do you remember? That's where he returns and where he faced the Malach, where his name became Israel. This becomes, he basically is building up national religious sites. Is that brilliant from his part? Yes. How do the people look at him? Wow. And by the way, when he does this, that's wonderful. Now, there's one area that he knows he can't compete with, and what's that? Yerushalayim. So keep that in mind. But it makes sense. He's going to build up Shechem and Pnuel, basically say, don't worry, where's your tax money going? To other religious sites in the country, ones that really tell you about the fortitude, the religious fortitude of Yisrael. Shechem, the capital of Ephraim, and certainly Pnuel, the place where Yaakov Avinu originally fought. And also by building up these areas, and Rechavam himself realizes, okay, right, he's developing, the people are certainly coming out not only to support him, but recognizing him as a religious leader as well. And we're going to see how significant that is, because his next stage then is unfortunately going to lead to the distortion of religion. And on a happy note.
Are we supposed to feel good about that from the Taragin? Like how are we supposed
Yes,
to feel about
yeah,
that?
it's great. If you can push off
It's very
exactly.
Taragin though, and it feels like doing the shit about the God. You know, like walking on an eggshell, like
Yeah.
how do you this is Taragin?
Yes.
So
So the good news is that we don't have today, meaning even Am Yisrael coming into Eretz Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu says it's inevitable that what's going to happen? At some point, you're going to turn away from God. God is going to give you warnings, agricultural diseases, you're going to be weakened, and then enemies will come in and eventually lead to galut. Shani, how long did that take? We weren't raised the whole time. We should have been putting a little more in eggshells. It took 850 years, right? Could it have been delayed more? Definitely. It had to happen at some point. The galut. Did this have to happen? Of course. I mean, because of Sinat Chinam, but does it happen again? I also, meaning our lives are a little meaning. I don't know what Hashem said. I do know that what else is exerting, that there will be Geula.